Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindie Chavez here. Today is Wednesday, February the 20th, 2019. It's 4 p.m. in New York, 1 p.m. in Los Angeles, 9 p.m. in London, and Sydney, Australia. It is 8 a.m. wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us to another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy, twice daily dose of happy, actually. And I'm pleased to be talking with Cindie Chavez once again because we're going to be doing Neville. It's Neville Day here on LOA Today. That's always a fun day during the week. We were catching up before the show and found out that things are going well at your end. So that's good to hear because, well, it's been the word of the week for me this week. I did finally get back to it. I wish I had known about your remedy before I had to do all that, but I got there. You know, it's almost like you got there. Don't worry about the root, right?
Right.
That's really the bottom line. And I was also in a Facebook conversation with a young woman named Amu. I can't remember what her last name was. But she raised the question about resistance and what resistance is, and more importantly, how to get rid of it. And Amu, I think you're listening. I'm seeing people streaming. I think you're probably listening. So we're going to address that question now. And Cindie, when I mentioned it to you before the podcast, you said that's my favorite question. Why is that your favorite question?
Well, I love this question because if we can let go of resistance, then everything will, that's the obstruction to alignment is resistance.
Absolutely.
Right? So if we can learn how to, one, be aware of resistance, because sometimes we're resisting and we're not really conscious of it, I think. Mm-hmm. You were just talking about coming down with the flu.
Right.
And like taking this amount of time to even recognize, oh, wait, what am I doing here? I'm a deliberate creator. Right. I can have some impact on that, right?
Exactly.
So it's like that happens with all sorts of resistance where all of a sudden we realize that we're resisting. So if we can become aware of it sooner and then learn how to let go of it. But in order to do that, we have to figure out what it looks like. Yes. And a lot of times I think we get the idea that resistance is like saying no. Especially because of, now we have a whole, we have a use of that word in politics, right? The resistance.
Oh, yeah.
Or if you want to talk
absolutely.
about Star Wars movies, right? We have
right.
the resistance.
Yep.
Right? So it's like a movement. And it's like, and generally speaking, when we think of the word resist or resistance, it's that we're saying no to something. No, I'm resisting that.
No.
But
I just turned
my
my
video
off.
off. Yeah,
I just turned it off. Let me see if I can fix it. Okay, that should work.
There's another type of resistance, and that is when we're saying yes to something. And I don't mean in an allowing way, but in a way that we're attached to a specific outcome. Mm-hmm. So in Buddhism, there's a blessing, if you will. It's one of the four immeasurables that basically translates to say, may you be free, may you be liberated from attachment and aversion. And to me, those are both types of resistance because we're either saying like, no, I don't want that. No, I don't want that. Or we're saying, yes, it has to happen this way. I want that. This has to be that way. Right? And both of those things are resistance.
They are.
And resistance blocks the flow of what we're trying to align with.
Right.
We think about the path of least resistance is the path in nature.
Yep.
The path that water takes. The path that electricity takes. I think we've talked about this before, so you may even have some other examples. But when we can let go, and the easiest way I know to do that is one, first recognize it, and then be okay with whatever is. Mm-hmm. That's hard to do when it's something that you think you don't want, like the flu.
Or if it's something that you think you really, really want and doubt that it's going to show up, either way.
Right. So being able to say, okay, it is what it is. I'm going to relax. Mm-hmm. Recognizing what resistance feels like in your body. Like we've had this discussion before, and I think we had other people chiming in about what it feels like to them. Mm-hmm. For me, I often can feel just like a constriction in the core of my body, sort of in my solar plexus. And sometimes it's really subtle, but I recognize it's there when I'm, experiencing a lot of resistance.
My body has
And
taught
for
me
other
that
people,
I can't really count on the subtleties. My body usually hits the core with a 2x4 to make sure I actually feel it.
well, that's one thing is that our body is really smart, and it usually starts with a whisper.
Hmm.
But if we don't hear it when it's whispering at us, it starts shouting at us. And the
Shouting.
shout usually is painful, right? Seriously.
Very true. Very true.
So if Amu is there and listening and can access the chat, I'd be interested if that answered the question. And if anyone else has anything to add, I would love to have you chime in.
Well, Jeffrey actually asked a follow-up question. I haven't seen anything from Amu yet, but we'll give her a chance to type something in if she wants to. But Jeffrey says, are our brains equipped to recognize the path of least resistance?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think, yes, I think they are. But equipped is one thing. Hardwired already is another.
Yes.
Right? Because
Very
we've
true.
talked about this before. Like, when you go out of town, your brain actually changes when you're in a town that you're not familiar with, as opposed to when you're in your hometown, going from home to work to the grocery, wherever you go. The places that like, people use this expression. They're like, "Oh, I know this neighborhood like the back of my hand." Right? Right? And they can navigate it. And if there's I was recently visiting my son, and the neighborhood that we were going to had all this construction. So he was like, just come to me and I'll drive. Why? Because he knows the neighborhood, and it doesn't matter if there's construction. He knows how to go another way. And when we're in an area where we're comfortable, and I don't just mean geographically, I mean metaphorically too, things just flow real easily, but there may be resistance that we live with all the time. And so when we go out of town, physically go out of town, our brain is on a different kind of like high alert. It's paying much more attention because we don't know the streets and we don't know where we are, and we have to pay attention. So I think that the question about, are our brains equipped to know the path of least resistance? I think the equipment is all there.
Yep.
It's how we use it. And so sometimes we don't know the path. We don't know what the path is. And we have to, that saying about when you're driving on the highway, that your headlights only shine a certain distance, and that's really all you can see is a short distance ahead of you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of like that. Like, we feel our way, and when we get used to recognizing resistance, we notice when it's there, and we learn how to relax already.
True.
Like, take it easy already, and recognize, pivot ourselves to thinking better thoughts and to thinking about what we want instead of what we don't want.
I think I can even extend that metaphor a little bit, because if we can relax enough to allow the information to come in, as a night driver, a person driving at night, that's often a difficult thing for people driving at night. And people often get very tense about it. And the ones who remain tense, they find it to be a trial for all of their lives. But if you can allow yourself to relax, your night vision starts to kick in after a while. And so even though you can't see really clearly all the way down the road, you can see the 200 yards that your headlights cover. But beyond that, you can start to make out kind of images, kind of like outlines of stuff. And I think that's kind of a good metaphor for what happens as we learn to see that path of least resistance in our lives heading forward. We can't necessarily see it clearly, but we can start to see the outlines of it a little bit.
I think it's a great metaphor. Yeah, because the more we relax, the more the more we can take in, the more information we can take in. I've actually suggested that to people before when they didn't know, like, I don't know, right? It's like, I don't know what I'm, supposed to be doing or whatever. I don't know my next step. And I've suggested, okay, so make the intention to be aware of information. Just open your mind to information so that you can know your next step, whatever it is.
Right.
And relaxation, that's another part of that, is just, I like that metaphor a lot. It reminded me of we have hurricanes down here where I live.
Oh, quite a few.
And about 10 years ago, we had a pretty big hurricane and we didn't have any power. And so at night, my son and I were here with no power, and it was, no lights, no street lights. So it's just as dark as it could be.
Right.
And we had one candle. So we took the candle and we put it in, I think we put it in the bathroom. And we came back out and we paid attention to how much time it took because we couldn't see anything. We couldn't see our hand in front of our face.
Yep.
And in about 2 hours, we actually were marveling that we could see pretty well. Enough. So we got up and walked into the other room where the candle was, and it almost blinded us. There was just one candle in the room. It seemed so bright.
Sure.
So it's all perspective, and it's the same way with resistance and with learning how to relax and be aware of what your body's telling you. It's all really important stuff. And it will change your experience, just like that changed my experience. Like, we didn't do anything. We just sat there and waited.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you mentioned driving and resistance all in kind of the same story there. There's a story that I've told in the past, but it's a really good example of how resistance can affect driving, not let alone driving with 200 yards of headlights, but just driving in general. Because when Louise and I met, we met in 1998, and that summer we spent some time going to Rhode Island where her family was, because obviously she wanted to introduce me to her family. And I'd actually met them once, and we were on a second trip. It was in July. No, it was August. I'm sorry. It was in August. And we went down to the shoreline. I mean, obviously, if you're going to be in Rhode Island on the shoreline, in the summer, you go down to the beach. That's what you do.
Of course.
So we went to the beach, and it was great. We had a nice day. And at the end of the day, now I had just bought this car about the same time that I met Louise. It wasn't a new car, but it was new for me. And it was a really nice one. I was really liking it a lot. And so Louise says, who I've just known for about 2 months now, says, I know this road better than you. Would you let me drive it? So I'm instantly faced with a little mini crisis because my new girlfriend, who I like really, really a lot, is asking to drive my car that I just got. And I haven't even seen her hardly drive yet. So I don't even know what to expect, right? This is like a little bit of a test, I think. And I can't say I totally passed the test, but it wasn't a failure either, as you'll discover in a moment. Because now this was long before I knew about law of attraction. And I swear to God, the words that came out of my mouth when I finally answered her was fine, just don't get into an accident. I don't think I have to explain the next part of the story too well, but needless to say, about 10 minutes down the road on a highway that was absolutely devoid of cars, one car coming in the opposite direction pulled in front of us, stopped in the middle of our lane, and we slammed into him and had an accident in the middle of an empty highway. It wasn't Louise's fault at all. And boy, did I later on, what I knew about what law of attraction was, I realized what was going on, because talking about resistance, when I handed her that key and said, just don't get into an accident, I had this pain in the pit of my stomach, this tightness.
Oh, wow.
I had all the indications of resistance going on, but I didn't know what to listen for. I had no idea that I should be paying attention to that was important, that I should do some relaxing. I had no idea whatsoever. But all the indications were right there. And when I said that it was not exactly the best move I made, it actually turned out in one way to be a great move, because the accident was the other person's fault completely. Their insurance company admitted it. We ended up getting a new car, an engagement ring, new bicycles, and a complete payment of all of our wedding expenses from that accident.
Oh, wow.
So,
good luck, bad luck, who knows?
Good luck, yeah, exactly. That's what it was, yes. So, on the one hand, I don't recommend anyone go through that in order to pay for their wedding, but on the other hand, you learn things, and good things can come out of what seem to be bad things.
That's a great story, by the way. Oh,
oh my.
The
Jeffrey
words
also
that come out of our mouths.
Yeah, no kidding. Jeffrey also asked... I'm sorry, Shelley asked at a line, she said, I think when we get really good at having faith we are better able to let go and allow. And that's a really good point, because that's really what law of attraction is about. It's having faith in what, especially at first, seems to be completely nebulous and completely outside of anything we can pin down any fact to. That's tough.
Right. I mean, that's what faith is.
Yeah.
It's totally not evidence-based. It's totally just saying, I'm going to look past all of this contrary evidence, and I'm going to still believe that this is going to happen. It's not an easy thing to do, but I agree. I agree with that statement that the stronger our faith gets, and part of that is practice and experience, right? Like you had this story that you just told, and I promise, if you're in the same situation again where someone says, hey, can I take your car? And you're going to be like, oh, wait, I've been through this before.
I know this one. I know how this one goes.
Right. I know. Yeah, I'm going to change my answer and pick door number 2 this time. Right. It's different.
Yeah.
So part of it is just, you have to go through these things to learn. It's part of the learning process. That whole idea about we learn from our mistakes. I mean, I don't really believe there are any mistakes. And the reason why is because we are learning. It is a process. So.
And look what good came out of this mistake. We paid for our wedding. I mean, that was completely unexpected.
Unbelievable.
It was crazy. So, even a mistake turned out to be not so bad, which means you're right. It's not really a mistake. It's just, I like the way Louise says it. It's like taking a different route from what you expected to your destination. And that's really what it is.
Somebody brought up, it might have been Jeffrey. I can't remember. Somebody a week or so ago brought up Ram Dass and some of the things he said. And it brought to mind the quote from me about we're all just walking each other home. And hearing you say it, it's like we're all just walking each other home and we're all going a different route than we thought we were going to go.
This is true. Yeah.
Completely different.
I think that's also a key portion of what faith really is. At first, when I was trying to learn faith and trying to apply it, I was doing it against the background of my own misbegotten introduction to faith through organized religion and my own rejection of all that. So I had a definite bias going on there. But as I look on it now faith is more about having the confidence of, I don't necessarily know how it's going to work out, but it's sure going to be fun to watch.
I love that. And yes, that's the thing right there, is that we talk about the hows all the time. Mm-hmm. But the faith is knowing that it's going to happen even if you don't know how.
Exactly.
And that all the ways you've devised in your head and imagined are probably not going to be the way.
Almost certainly, actually. I have like a 0.000 batting average on that. I don't ever get it right.
I think there's been some times when, I think that's why it sort of feels like a miracle whenever you can say, it's like, oh my goodness, it all turned out exactly the way we planned it.
Oh yeah, it's noteworthy.
Yeah. Doesn't usually happen, so.
Very true, very true. So hopefully Amu saw this and got some value out of it. And if you're still listening, Amu, and you missed the first part of it, this will be available as a replay. So just come back after we're done with the podcast. You can play it from the beginning and hear the whole thing. But meantime, this is Neville Day, and we get to go on with our book. We're talking about Your Faith is Your Fortune, which is actually the first book that Neville wrote. But I think it's our fourth or our fifth. Is it our fifth that we've been doing? Something like that.
Might be our fifth book that we've read of Neville's, yeah. And it's one of the long ones. Some of the other ones are a little shorter, and we've kind of... It doesn't really matter. Sometimes we've taken forever on a short book and zoomed through a longer book. But... Sometimes
we've taken forever on a one-page paragraph, a one-paragraph page, rather. I mean, it just depends on what we're running into. or how much trouble we're having operating the decoder ring. It could be either one.
It's just that we're having fun, and so it's like time flies when you're having fun, and sometimes we get 2 sentences and an hour goes by. What happened? I don't know. I actually had that discussion with someone yesterday, or it came from a discussion that I had with one of my besties, who's an absolute miracle worker with Law of Attraction. She's the Law of Attraction coach, and we spent an hour on the phone that felt like about 10 minutes. I hung up and I just shook my head because it went by so fast. And I actually wrote a letter to my email list after it because it made such an impression on me that it's those things where you lose track of time. Mm. And Neville's even talked about this. It's the things that you do, whatever they are for you. For me, it can be painting or reading a really good book or knitting or talking to a friend or hanging out with my husband. But sometimes the time goes by so fast and I realize that's when you're in alignment.
That's true.
It's like my version of time travel, right? It's like, what just happened to that hour?
Right.
And when time flies when you're having fun. Mm-hmm. And when you're not having fun, sometimes it doesn't fly so fast.
Not really, no. I'm still trying to learn how to reverse that. It seems to me that I should be experiencing a lot more time in the fun place, and that should seem like it just goes on forever and just is endlessly fun. But I haven't quite learned that trick yet.
Right, and that's a cool physics trick, too.
Yeah, it is.
How you can somehow collapse it down to where it's flying and it still lasts for eternity. Yeah, I like that idea.
So somehow we remain mindful, I guess, of everything being in the now, even past, present, and future, which is what we're told is true. Time doesn't really exist. It's all an illusion, and it's all already occurred, and it's all right there. Somehow we have to just kind of believe that for a moment or 3 or 5 hours or whatever.
Well, let's see what Neville has to say. We're on chapter 9 of the book, Your Faith is Your Fortune. And chapter 9, the title is The Foundation Stone. Mm-hmm. He starts out again with a scripture. I'll make the quick disclaimer to remind us all that when Neville uses Christian scripture, and when he talks about Jesus Christ or he talks about God, and some other things as well, but he defines those words as meaning either your consciousness or your imagination,
right?
Which is a big change for what some of us learned these words mean. So I just want to always get us on that track as we start, because in this particular book, he leads off with a Christian scripture almost every chapter.
Everyone.
So he says, he's quoting 1 Corinthians, and he says, "Let every man take heed how he buildeth thereon. For other foundations can no man lay than that is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now if man build upon this foundation gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, stubble, every man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it." And then he goes on to break this down for us. He says, the foundation of all expression is consciousness. Try as man will, he cannot find a cause of manifestation other than his consciousness of being. Man thinks he has found the cause of disease in germs, the cause of war in conflicting political ideologies and greed. All such discoveries of man, catalogued as the essence of wisdom, are foolishness in the eyes of God. There is only one power, and this power is God. And then in parentheses, he says, consciousness. It kills, it makes alive, it wounds, it heals, it does all things, good, bad, or indifferent.
And I've made a lot of personal progress, I have to say, because of this one section here. When we first started reading Neville, this section would have thrown me like crazy because of what the double meanings, what the substitutions mean and so forth. Now, I find it to be really quite fascinating because of what he refers to specifically about these causes of disease and of war and political struggles and greed and all that kind of thing. And then he qualifies saying, no, it's actually all the power of God, which is consciousness. And there's a really interesting irony there because all of those things come from consciousness. So they're really true, but what he's saying is they're not the origin. They originate in the consciousness. And if you understand it that way, now you get a different perspective on all that stuff. And that perspective really does shift when you look at it. Well, at least it does for me. When I look at it that way.
Too.
Does it for you too? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because when I see it that way, I see, for instance, the whole thing about germs causing disease. And I look at modern medicine. Modern medicine has made amazing strides. And yet, from this larger perspective of consciousness, now I can understand that as many strides as modern medicine has made, there's so many more to make. They're exciting. The future is, ripe with excitement. And while we might not be particularly pleased in some ways with the way modern medicine handles certain situations, we can also see the progress that's being made to handle things better, to take on things that are not just purely reducible to double-blind studies and look beyond the double-blind studies and see what's going on from a spiritual level, that's huge.
Yes.
For the scientific community, that's a big, big step to take. And they're not doing it in large steps. They're doing it in baby steps, but you can see it starting to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, I told you, I don't know if we were on the air or off, but that when my mother was fighting cancer, we were talking to the doctor, and the doctor said, look, we were asking about certain alternative therapies we wanted to try. We were also talking about things that we did not want to do. And he said, look, the bottom line is her mind is the most powerful medicine.
Right.
And it was like mind blown about, hearing that from the doctor. Mm-hmm. So it's amazing. And I also like that Neville points out here, he says, there's only one power, and this power is God, or consciousness. And he says it kills, it makes alive, it wounds, it heals, it does all things, good, bad, or indifferent. And I think it's really important that we remind ourselves about that it's the reason why I attempt not to label certain things good or bad. Especially when we get into the emotional realm, and especially because in law of attraction circles, there's also a lot of thought about, that's a bad thought or a bad feeling, and don't feel that, or you shouldn't, it's like, no, feelings are just feelings. There aren't good feelings and bad feelings. There are feelings that feel comfortable and feelings that feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But good, bad, and different, our consciousness is creating all of it. And I think that's a real key distinction to remember.
I've had plenty of opportunity lately to gain, or in some cases regain, perspective when dealing with people who don't have this understanding yet. So while we just acknowledged that medicine, for instance, is in its own way starting to take small steps toward this direction, and it's exciting to see that, just the other day I saw a post by somebody who very sadly had been physically abused by his father when he was small, and was very angry about it, carrying a lot of anger about it. And he had gotten into an Abraham group and was trying to, I think he was basically there to start fights. I don't think he really was looking for help. He had this huge amount of anger, and he just wanted to fight anybody who said there was anything that could be done to overcome the fact that he had been abused by his father, and fight anybody who wanted to say that, you're the one who's hanging on to the anger and all that kind of thing. He wasn't having any of it. And it was a real reminder, when you run into somebody like that, it's not the end of the world. It just means they haven't gotten to a point yet where they're ready to make any kind of changes. And it's all going to work out okay. But it's awful hard to remember that when you're seeing somebody like that, just, really going off the deep end.
Well, and the anger is there because it's giving him some really important information.
Absolutely.
Right? And sometimes we have a strong emotion. It's always trying to give us some kind of information, and we don't know how to process it. We don't know what to do with it. And in the case of anger, that's one thing that I know, especially for girls and women, but probably for little boys and men as well, is that it's one of those emotions that gets labeled bad. Mm-hmm. Like we feel like we are not allowed to be angry.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's a bad thing, and you need to stop that. Don't act like that. And so we're never really taught how to process anger.
Absolutely.
And anger is a really valuable emotion. And so that's one of the things that I wish were taught, in grade school is, instead of just don't behave like that, that's bad. Be nice. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all of that kind of stuff. If we would actually recognize anger, sadness, grief, frustration, all these emotions that get put in the bad category and get told to stop that, don't do that. If we could just learn how to process them in a healthy way, then we wouldn't have that kind of situation. But this sounds like a person that's got so much anger, it's just got to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And how does it come out? It comes out by fighting back.
Yep.
Starting fights and it's so, that's one of those things. I have a heart for like helping people learn that it's okay to feel all those things that don't feel good. It doesn't mean it's okay to have an inappropriate outburst with those things. It's not okay to display those emotions in an inappropriate way. But it is okay to feel them. But that's the learning curve, I think, is learning how to process them correctly so that we can let go of them and have less resistance. Because all of those things cause resistance.
And at the same time, also, it's important to recognize that it's not okay for him to have been treated that way when he was a kid. I mean, clearly that was just plain wrong. That was horrible.
Right.
He should never have had to
and
do that.
And that's what that emotion is saying to him.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So Neville says that man moves in a world that's nothing more or less than his consciousness objectified. Not knowing this, he wars against his reflections while he keeps alive the light and the images which project the reflections. Kind of interesting in light of what we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Then Neville says, he quotes John 8:12 saying, I am the light of the world. And he says, I am, consciousness is the light. That which I am conscious of being, my conception of myself, such as I am rich, I am healthy, I am free, are the images. Now you see, in this person's case, and in a lot of persons' cases, I am a victim, I was abused. That's the story.
That's my story.
And that's the projection. And it's the truth. I'm not saying it didn't happen.
Oh, yeah.
But that's the story that keeps those reflections coming back and causing us to war against them because we don't want that, right?
Right.
So Neville says the world is the mirror magnifying all that I am conscious of being.
How interesting, too, that he describes consciousness itself as being the light. I don't think I remember hearing anyone describe consciousness as being light. But it is. It has to be. How could it be anything else but?
I'm trying to think of this book. And now I can't remember the book, so I'll have to bring it up another time. But it's a book about, it's a doctor, and he talks about this. He talks about from the time a person is born, how many different, and every religion on the planet, every spiritual teaching, they all talk about like the light in someone's eyes, right? And how when someone is dying, how they say the light is going out. And he talks about the actual electrical impulse, like as a doctor, that there is an electrical, impulse there when we are alive, and how it's related to, and that's the whole point of his book, is that consciousness is literally light. It's really pretty fascinating. I'll try to figure out the name of it. This is what happens when my mental card catalog isn't very...
That's all right. Well, I kind of cued it in your mind in a very quick way, so you didn't have a lot of time to process it. But what it was telling me when I was hearing you read that phrase, I am, parentheses, consciousness is the light. So the idea I am, or my own consciousness, is the light. When I thought about it that way, I thought how ironic that so often we human beings say, I can't see where I'm going. I can't see the way. I can't see what's going on here. I don't understand. Not realizing we're the light. We're the source of the light. That's, the irony of that is just staggering.
And the verse that he quoted says, I am the light of the world.
Yes.
So what he's saying here is that your consciousness, my consciousness, is the light of the world. Which is pretty amazing. Because he goes on to say, the world is the mirror magnifying all that I am conscious of being.
Yeah. I mean,
and I love this.
Go
Stop
back.
trying to change the world. Right? It's only the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of, and I've taught this a lot about, I call it the magic mirror, but when you look into a mirror, you're checking yourself, right? It's like, do I have spinach in my teeth? Is my hair a mess? Is my lipstick smeared? Whatever you're looking for. And when you see what the problem is, oh my goodness, my hair's a mess. Well, then you get a brush and fix it. You don't smash the mirror. You don't blame the mirror. Right. You fix yourself.
Yeah.
And so if we have this idea that Neville is talking about, where he says, look, the whole world, look around you at the world that you see. It's just reflecting your consciousness. So that's the place we start when we want to change things. Mm-hmm. We start with our consciousness. The same way we start to change ourselves when the actual physical mirror is reflecting something that we don't like. We start with us.
Yep. Now, flashback.
Be the change.
Flashback to the beginning of our conversation here before we started doing Neville. We were talking about resistance. And in the context of what Neville's talking about here, it becomes pretty plain to me. Resistance is when we can't see our own light. When we can't see what our own light is shining on. And we can't see any of that reflection. We have blocked ourselves from seeing that in some way.
Yeah. And look, Neville goes on to say pretty much just what we just talked about. Man's attempt to change the world by force is as fruitless as breaking a mirror in the hope of changing its face.
There it is, yeah, what you just said. Yep.
Leave the mirror and change your face. Leave the world alone and change your conceptions of yourself. The reflection then will be satisfactory. Freedom or imprisonment, satisfaction or frustration can only be differentiated by the consciousness of being. Regardless of your problem, its duration, or its magnitude, careful attention to these instructions will in an amazingly short time eliminate even the memory of the problem. Ask yourself this question: how would I feel if I were free? The very moment you sincerely ask this question, the answer comes. Now, I think an interesting thing, I'm trying to remember what Neville book it was that we did, and I can't remember which specific one, but we read at least 3 stories, maybe more, of people that were using Neville's work to manifest something that they wanted to deliberately create, and each time it was 3 weeks. Do you remember that?
Oh, that's right, yes. Yeah, 3 was the magic number, yes.
We were like, did you hear that again? 3 weeks, 3 weeks. It's like, we got so excited because we had this idea. It was like, we can pretty much create anything we want in just 3 weeks. So I think it's funny that Neville is saying here, regardless of your problem, its duration, or its magnitude, careful attention to these instructions will in an amazingly short time eliminate even the memory of the problem.
It's especially funny because yesterday in particular, both in the morning with Steve Rowell and in the afternoon with Alex King, both those conversations we ended up talking about how there's also the negative side of this idea of 3, because we have the saying that bad things happen in 3s or deaths happen in 3s or something like that. And what we were observing is that every time that we assert something like that, it takes 3 weeks, or bad things happen in 3s, or all this kind of thing, we're basically setting a limit and saying to the universe, this is what I'm expecting. And the universe says, your wish is my command. Here you go, 3 weeks, 3 days, 3 times. And
now the universe is like, I was going to do it in 2 days, but if you want to wait 3 weeks, all right. Foiled again.
Yeah, right.
So Neville says, no man can tell another the satisfaction of his desire fulfilled. It remains for each within himself to experience the feeling and joy of this automatic change of consciousness. The feeling or thrill that comes to one in response to his self-questioning is the father state of consciousness, or foundation stone upon which the conscious change is built. Now, I think this is the first time I've heard Neville use this phrase.
The foundation stone?
The father state of
the father state. Oh, okay.
Because he talks about, we we were studying Neville talking about consciousness in a male and female
Right.
kind of way, like the subconscious is feminine, the consciousness is masculine, and all of that. And he even went on to say, this is just a metaphor to help you understand.
Right. It's all really part of the same thing.
Right. For him right here to say that when we have a feeling of a thrill in regards to us asking ourselves this question. So if I ask myself, Cindie, what would it feel like to feel free? And when I get a thrill that comes as a response to me answering that question, he says, this is the father state of consciousness, or the foundation stone upon which the conscious change is built.
Do you have any sense about why he does that? I think that's really
interesting, because I've had this experience.
But why does he choose to call a gender parent, father? It could have been mother, I guess. But why does he choose to use a parent as the metaphorical concept here? Do you get a sense of that?
In my sense, it would be because we're creating something.
Okay.
So, and it's interesting that you said, could it be a mother? As far as I'm concerned, it could be either.
Yeah, I think so.
I probably prefer mother.
Well, especially with modern sensibilities, because these days, if it's a woman having a thought, then it would be the mother. If it's a man having a thought, it'd be the father. It'd be, just that's the way we do it these days. But at the time, that was probably the way they would do it.
But I think he's using it because he's going back to these scriptures about the Father and the Son and the foundation. Mm-hmm. And so, but he's telling us that that's the very beginning of it. And the thing I love about this is that he used this, the feeling or thrill that comes to one in response to his self-questioning. It's like, I know I've had this experience lots of times, is that I've asked myself something about what I wanted. And I may go through a period of time where I can honestly say, I'm not sure. I don't know. I want to know. I'm trying to figure this out. But when I get honest with myself and I really decide, oh, you know what? I do know what I want. I want this. It's a really great feeling to get clarity. And as a coach, it's something I do all the time, is help people get clear on what it is they want. Because most of the time we say we want something because we think that thing is going to give us something else. Right? You made a point. Well, I want a new job. Well, why do you want a new job? Well, because I want to be able to have weekends off. Well, what would having weekends off give you? Well, my son plays baseball and I never get to see his game. Well, what would being able to go to a son's baseball game give you? Oh my gosh, I would be so excited to spend that time with him and watch him, out there having a great time playing ball. You see how far I went from the new job? It's like, and what would that feel like? Oh, I would feel like I was enjoying being a parent, and I would feel like my son felt supported, and we can go real deep with these kind of things. Sure. But when we get to that depth, okay, that's the father state of consciousness Neville's talking about. That's the foundation stone that we can start building the change around. Because we've sort of dug down to the bedrock, if you will, right? We've hit the place where we're starting to understand why we really want these changes, whatever they are.
It's a good point. It's a very good point. The fact that we're trying to dig deep in that way kind of points me in the direction of something like, well, you described it well. You called it clarity, and that points me toward Abraham. And you specifically tied into the idea that you get this thrill, this feeling of excitement, and that this feeling of excitement comes from the clarity. And the reason I tie that into Abraham is when you look at Abraham's list from their back of their book, Asking It Is Given, the list of 22 points on the emotional guidance scale, the very top of the scale has like 5 or 6 items on that first line. One of those items is clarity. And I often wondered why clarity is on that line. Well, you just answered the question. It's because when you have clarity, you get a feeling of thrill. You get a feeling of excitement. So, yeah, I guess it has to be on the top line now that I think about it.
Yeah, and it's once we get really clear on what we want and why we want it and how we're going to feel once we get it, that's where we start building. I mean...
Yep.
So Neville says just how this feeling will embody itself, no one knows, but it will. The Father consciousness has ways that no man knows. It is the unalterable law. All things express their nature. As you wear a feeling, I love this, as you wear a feeling, it becomes your nature. Somebody that was speaking with us on this afternoon show one day was using this metaphor. And I'm trying to remember who it was, but she was saying it's like wearing a coat. You know, you have to get used to new clothes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's
remember
good.
what I'm talking about?
I don't remember the comment, but that sounds like one of our listeners, because our listeners are pretty special.
So he says it might take a moment or a year. It's entirely dependent upon the degree of conviction. As doubts vanish and you can feel, I am this, you begin to develop the fruit or the nature of the thing you are feeling yourself to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When a person buys a new hat or a pair of shoes, he thinks everyone knows that they are new. He feels unnatural with his newly acquired apparel until it becomes part of him. The same applies to the wearing of the new states of consciousness. When you ask yourself the question, how would I feel if my desire were at this moment realized? The automatic reply, until it is properly conditioned by time and use, is actually disturbing. The period of adjustment to realize this potential of consciousness is comparable to the newness of the wearing apparel. And somebody brought this question up last week. It said, like, how come, or a week before maybe, but said, why sometimes we try to manifest something and then we do, and then everything goes wrong.
Mm.
Or we lose it as fast as we've gotten it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this is why. It's because we weren't really ready for it. We didn't have that adjustment period. Neville is encouraging us to wear that feeling until it feels natural.
Well, I'm also wondering if we can tie this concept into the one phrase that you first introduced Neville to me with, which is assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. I wonder if we can then modify it to say wear the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
I like that. I like it. It's easy to understand.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same idea,
and he says,
but it's more physical.
Yes. Yeah, and I like the idea of wearing a feeling because you do. Mm-hmm. To some degree, right? I mean, you feel it in your body. He says the period of adjustment to realize this potential of consciousness is comparable to the newness of the wearing apparel, not knowing that consciousness is ever outpicturing itself in conditions round about you. Like Lot's wife, you continually look back upon your problem and again become hypnotized by its seeming naturalness.
But it's real. It's real. I'm telling you, it's real.
And, that also reminds me of a situation where I've had people ask this before, but why people sometimes end up in the same type of job situations, and I mean ones that they don't care for, mm-hmm. or the same type of relationships, or, they start to recognize a pattern. And I know a lot of people that have reached out to me for coaching have said, I'm reaching out because, one day I recognized that there's a pattern here. It's like I recognize I keep going through the same motions and getting into job situations that are the same. And I know I did that with a job situation. I did the same exact thing for years and years. I would get a job. I would work really hard. I would smile the whole time. And whenever my boss said, oh, wow, you're doing such a great job. Do you think could you handle this too? Sure. And I would just take on more and more tasks, more and more work, but I never got paid anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I never asked to be paid anymore.
Right.
And I would smile the whole time, but of course inside I was grumbling and I was like, why are they doing this to me? No one appreciates me, right?
That's
Victim
right.
mode all over.
Absolutely.
And at some point I recognized this is what I do over and over. Every new job I get, I do the same exact thing. Well, as soon as I was aware of the pattern, I was able to break the pattern. Right? And I think that that's what we're talking about here when Neville says, that like Lot's wife, continually looking back upon your problem and becoming hypnotized by its seeming naturalness. Yep. This was natural for me. This is what I did every time until I realized
That's a great
I didn't
tie-in.
want to do that anymore.
That really is a great tie-in. That's exactly what happens. We get caught in those little traps that we set for ourselves, not realizing that we're setting them for ourselves.
Oh
And
yeah, it was all on me.
but so often, like you were doing in that situation, not only were you pointing the fingers at why don't they treat me well, but you were doing what Abraham says. You kept taking yourself wherever you went. So you just kept reproducing it over and over and over again.
It's like, I'm leaving this job. They don't appreciate me. And I go to the next job and it's exactly
It's
the
exactly
same.
the same.
Right?
Oh,
Exactly the same. But we see people do this with relationships. We see
Yep.
people do this with cities. I hate this town. I'm going to get out of here. And they move to another town. They're like, it's just like the last town. Meet your new boss. It's the
Same as the old boss. Yeah. Yeah, Peter Townsend did have moments of clarity in between drugs.
So Neville says, heed the words of Jesus. Parentheses, he has the word salvation. Leave all and follow me. Let the dead bury the dead.
What a combination. I mean, where else but Neville Goddard can you find a combination of verses like this? Nowhere.
Your problem might have you so hypnotized by its seeming reality and naturalness that you find it difficult to wear the new feeling or consciousness of your Savior. You must assume this garment if you would have results. The stone, consciousness, which the builders rejected, would not wear, is the chief cornerstone, and other foundations can no man lay. So that sounds to me slightly unnatural. He's using the word natural just because it's not generally the way we speak.
Mm-hmm.
But he's saying just what you said before, which I really loved, is that wear the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
Wear it until it feels natural. It probably won't at first because it's not where you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the more we can get used to it and get used to that feeling so that it is natural, I think looking back and recognizing patterns is, that thing that you're always complaining about, that thing I'm always complaining about, that's probably part of the pattern.
Oh, yeah. Annoyingly so, I have to say. Now, he also slipped another concept in there, and I think it's one we need to get out the decoder ring for. He slipped it in. He slipped it in at the end, the second to last or third to last paragraph. He talked about the new feeling or consciousness of your Savior. And in Christian terms, Savior has a very specific meaning, has a very specific connotation. And so we need to address, does he have the same connotation here? Or is he meaning something completely different? So what exactly does he mean? That's a pretty big difference right there.
Well, once again, this is a place where Neville is talking about your salvation being freedom from whatever it is that you're trying to get free of. And what saves you from that? Your consciousness.
Right.
So your consciousness is, once again, is your salvation. That's it. It's not, and we all look outside of ourselves so many times.
Mm-hmm.
If we just had a different president,
yes,
if
right.
I just had a different boss,
Mm-hmm.
if I had a different neighbor,
Mm-hmm.
if someone would just do this for me, if whatever it is. And yet Neville is saying, no, it's no one else is going to save you. This salvation that you're looking for, the savior that you're looking for, is actually your own consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Neville's saying.
And that's big. That is an important thing to note. It's also an important difference to understand between what Neville teaches and what the church typically teaches, because it kind of reminds me of the story that I've told about how when Louise and I lived in Virginia, the town we lived in, Warrenton, was a pretty small town, 25,000 people, but it did have a small downtown area, and that was part of my walking path. I would walk 5 or 6 miles a day, and part of that trek was through town. And one particular day, I'm walking through town. I could still visualize this one little short street, main street, that I would walk down, and there was this one church. I think it was an Episcopal church on the right-hand side. I'd walk past it every day, doing it about 5 miles an hour. I was moving right along. This one day, there's a guy out front, and you can just tell he's stopping passersby. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, great. He's going to try to save me, He's going to try to preach the gospel to me. He's going to try to do something like that. But, okay, I just kind of relaxed. I figured I'll just keep walking and let him try to keep up with me if he can, because I move pretty quick, as you can imagine, given my height, So He came up to me. I said, if you want to talk to me, you're gonna have to keep up with me. So he tried. He's pacing along like I am, and he gets really excited. And he says to me, "Are you saved?" And without even a flash of thought, I said, "Well, I've never been lost." And he just stopped. He just stopped because his idea of saving didn't match anything that I had in mind. I didn't have anything like Neville had in mind. I didn't have a clear sense of what saving was for me. I didn't have any clear meaning for it. And that's why I could just rattle off like, well, I was never lost. But he didn't know what to do with that. And the fact that he didn't know what to do with that shows to me how limited the church's understanding of saving is. I think Neville's is a much broader and much more comprehensive examination of the word.
And it has absolutely nothing to do with anything that the church is saying, which is why I'm constantly making like this, disclaimer at the beginning of a Neville chapter, because it's so far from what any of us would have been taught that these verses meant. And I say that because the verses are from a particular belief system.
Absolutely.
And I know what that belief system teaches. So it's their book, and they can teach it however they like.
Right.
So I'm not saying that, but just to say that Neville's understanding of it and Neville's, definitions, his explanations, his exegesis, if you will, is very, very different. It's very esoteric. It's very metaphorical, and it has to be understood, or else you don't understand anything Neville's trying to say. None of it would make sense.
What I'm leading up to with that experience with the guy who I stopped dead in his tracks because I didn't answer the question in a way he was used to hearing the answer.
Because he thinks everyone is lost.
He thinks everybody's lost, absolutely.
Right.
But if that guy had, instead of coming up to me and saying, "Have you been saved?" if he had said to me instead, "Has your consciousness learned how to save itself?" he would have stopped me in my tracks, because that would have been completely different from anything I'd ever heard of before. And now he would have had my attention, like, "What are you talking about? This sounds interesting."
What?
So that's my long-winded way of saying I really like the way that Neville looks at this, because it really does stop you in your tracks. It just makes you say,
it'd be so funny if he happened to be
this?
listening to our podcast.
Wouldn't that be cool? That would be great. I would love that.
Yeah.
If you are listening, please send us a note.
Please
that would be funny. I do want to make sure I get a couple of messages in, because I've been remiss in putting them in lately. So I'm making it my commitment this week to remind people, if you're not yet a subscriber, we want you to become one. We try to include the links everywhere that this is posted, but in case you can't find links in the description, just go to the homepage of our website at loatoday.net, and you'll find real big icons for you to click on. Depending on what kind of device you have, you click on the one for your device. It walks you right through the process of becoming a subscriber. And then all these episodes that we create come right to your smartphone whenever they're created, instantly. And then as you listen to an episode, when you listen to one that you like, hopefully you're liking all of them, but as you listen to one that you like, share the fact that you're liking it with people who you think might be interested, because that's how we spread the word, and that's how we get more and more people to get their daily dose of happy. Thank you to those of you who are already doing that, and we ask you to continue to do it. Keep spreading the word, and we just love our listeners, because they not only are they really advanced practitioners for the most part, but they're loyal and they're supporters. We really appreciate that. And also, Cindie, I would be greatly remiss if I didn't take a moment to ask you to explain to people how to reach out to you, because you are a life coach. You're a very, very good one, and sometimes people need to have that personal contact. So how do they reach you?
Well, they can find me site, cindiechavez.com, CINDIEDHAVEZ.com, and there's a contact form there. You can send me a note, email me at cindy@cindiechavez.com. That works too. However you reach out, I would love to hear from you. Just say hello. You don't even have to have some kind of reason, just say hello. I'd love to hear.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we love it whenever we hear from listeners. It just makes our day, so it's fun. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to doing Chapter 10. It has an interesting title, kind of an intriguing title, so something to look forward to for next week. But that will have to keep until next Wednesday, and so I wish you a happy week. And I don't know what to say, because every week I was so used to talking with you 3 times a week. Now it's one. It's like, I have to get it all into 1 hour. Oh, no. No, it's all good.
Well,
it's all good.
I will be back next next week.
I'm glad to hear that. That makes my whole week better. I know I'm going to talk to you next week. So, okay, this is good. I can do this. Hey, it's great. Thank you so much. Thanks to our live stream listeners. Thanks to our regular listeners as well, listening to the recorded podcast. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.